Recording in progress.
Okay.
Okay, I hereby declare the zoning board of adjustment for Long Hill Township to order at
7:39.
7:40. This is the May 17th, 2022 meeting. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by posting a copy of the public meeting dates on the municipal bulletin board and website, by sending a copy to the Echo Sentinel and Courier News newspapers, and by filing a copy with the municipal clerk. Standard board procedures. Any hearing conducted by the board is a quasi-judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. Meeting cutoff. Announcement is made that as a matter of procedure, it is the intention of the Zoning Board of Adjustment not to continue any matter past 10:30 p.m. at any regular or special meeting of the board unless a motion is passed by the members then present to extend the meeting to a later specified cutoff time. Electronic devices. All in attendance are asked to mute cell phones or any electronic devices as not to interrupt the proceeding. I guess we determined it doesn't interfere with it. I'll let Pledge of Allegiance. Tom, since you're sitting in that seat, why don't you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All righty. Now, roll call.
Yes, Mr. Aronio.
Here.
Mr. Giannakis.
Here.
Mr. Groskopf.
Here.
Mr. Hain is currently absent. Mr. Rosenberg is excused tonight. Mr. Lindeman.
Here.
Ms. Brennan is excused tonight. Vice Chairman Johnson is excused tonight. Chairman Correct?
Here.
Chairman, we have a quorum.
Okay, great. Terrific. I'm trying to slow down here. Hopefully, yes, Scott will come in. We have the minutes we have minutes from the May 3rd, 2022 board meeting. Has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Everyone here except for Ben, who is excused, is eligible to make a motion. Do I hear a motion to accept the minutes?
I'll move the minutes.
Second?
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, that takes care of the May 3rd
Thank
minutes. Now, we have the resolution, and you said you had a change to which one?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the Gallo resolution, the second one up, if we could take them
Okay.
out of order.
Sure.
I did have some edits to my own resolution, my apologies to the board, but on page 6 of 9, condition number 2, I believe we should be deleting that, as it is almost a verbatim repeat of the condition on page 8, number 18.
Which one we did leading?
This is Gallo.
Yeah, but what number?
Page 6,
Yeah.
condition 2.
Condition 2, okay.
If you look again at page 8,
Okay.
condition 18, it's the same condition.
Okay, but just repeated, okay.
Yeah, but not only that, candidly, 18 has the correct lot number, number
Okay.
2 didn't.
All right,
So
okay.
let's delete number 2.
All right.
And can't be any more honest and transparent than that. Now, also condition 5 on page 7. This is not critical, but I thought since the planner put it in her memo, I thought it bore being identified, and that is where it says the applicant shall meet all the conditions required for the conditional approval of governing senior suites, except as modified herein. I thought we should include, as she did, including the required deed restriction and annual certification.
Okay.
Those are particularly important conditions of that conditional use, so I thought it bore, as she did, putting it to the resolution. Those are the only 2 changes I had, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to put them in there.
All right, terrific. Okay.
Recording
we'll
stopped.
take
The recording has stopped.
Oh,
I didn't do it.
sorry.
Recording in progress.
This meeting is being recorded.
Sorry.
That's okay. All right, so let's take the Gallo one first, since we just had the changes. Who's eligible to vote on that?
Wait, hold on for it. So on this is Chairman Correct?
Gallo? Okay, just let the record reflect that Board Member Ranio has recused himself from the vote in consideration of the Gallo.
You weren't
Resolution,
eligible anyway.
You were not eligible, no.
You weren't, we didn't list you as eligible
No.
anyway.
I know I'm not eligible, but I'm also recusing myself.
That's fine. So
So-
just be quiet then. Don't do anything, it doesn't matter.
It's on,
thought you had to
it's on the
say that.
record that,
Yeah.
that
I
he's
think
recused
you're supposed to
himself.
say that on the record, are you not?
Okay.
Okay,
That
so-
would be the best.
So under advice
practice.
of counsel, I'm saying that on the record.
Okay, terrific.
Okay. Chairman Correct is eligible,
Thank
Mr. Giannakis is eligible, and Mr. Lin, and, wait a minute, hold on a minute. Yeah,
Not
Mr.
eligible,
Lindeman,
yeah,
right?
yeah, not eligible.
Yep,
Okay.
Mr. Lindeman. Mhm.
Would one of you
So
like to?
only three of you.
Oh, would one of you like to move this?
I'd like to make a move.
Motion to adopt as revised by the
Adopt
board
as
attorney?
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
as revised by
All
the
right,
board
and,
attorney.
I'll second.
Okay, you second? Okay, roll call?
Mr. Giannakis?
Yes,
Mr. Lindeman?
Yes.
Chairman Correct?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, great, terrific. Now we'll do the, Bichot Surreal. Any changes to that?
Not from
No,
me,
okay,
Mr. Chairman.
all right, good. All right, has everybody had a chance to review that one? And the same people seem to be,
Yes, same people.
okay. So, out of the people that are here, which is myself, Ben, and Gary,
Mr. Yep, that's it.
would like somebody to make a motion to move this resolution.
Motion to approve this resolution?
second,
All right, roll call.
Mr. Lindeman?
Yes.
Mr. Giannakis?
yes.
Chairman Correct?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right,
Thank you.
terrific. All right. All righty. Now, we have, coming up, the application. Major preliminary and final site plan carried from February 1st, 2022, February 15th, 2022, and April 5th, 2022. Block 10515, Lot 7, Zone B-D, 44 Plainfield Road, application number 21-13Z. Jonathan Roker, applicant proposes to construct a three-story mixed-use building to include 1,900 square feet of retail on the first floor and 24 residential units on the second and third floors. Applicant is here and ready?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, members of your professional staff. My name is Jeff Lehrer. I have watched you over the last 2 years on Hollywood Squares, and it's a pleasure to see you in person. You look much more pretty and handsome in person. Does that help me?
I don't know. No, but we'll take it anyway.
Okay. As you're aware,
So
my
do you.
client is
The pretty part.
seeking preliminary and final site plan approval and 2 design waivers. One has been eliminated based upon Mr. Aranio's comments, where we added 3 trees to the site and eliminated that design waiver. One relating to the height of the fence above the 4-foot trash enclosure, and the other requiring 5% parking lot landscaping, where we're providing 2%. So as to avoid increasing the impervious coverage on the property. And as I said, at the request of Mr. Aranio, we eliminated design waiver for planting 3 shade trees. To refresh the board's recollection, because it's been a while, we were here on February 15. On April 6, 2021, we received D1 use variance and bulk variance relief on the number of stories from 2 to 3 to permit the construction of a mixed-use project of 24 rental units and retail space on the first floor. At our first hearing on February 1, we listened very closely and intently to the board members' very probing questions and comments. And on February 15, we presented Mr. Sirocco, but at our February 15 meeting, we also came back with a revised plan showing you all the changes we had made since the February 1 meeting. When we finished with the testimony of Mr. Sirocco, our architect, certain board members requested that we revisit the architecture of the building, since they didn't think it was in keeping with the plan that was presented during the use variance phase of the application. So what was talked about was that Mr. Sirocco would speak with Liz Laney, your board planner, as the liaison between her and the board, And she did so over the past 3 months with Mr. Sirocco on a number of occasions. And ultimately, it was narrowed down to 2 versions, renderings. The first marked as A8 and the other one marked as A9 in your packets. We have been told that A9 is preferable to the board, but it does require C variance relief where a height of 35 feet is allowed, and the gabled roof portion of the building will be at 38.5 feet. So, Mr. Sirocco.
Can I squeak in a question? I don't want to interrupt your flow,
Go on.
though. I think I just heard you say you had been told that A9 was preferable, and I was just wondering, when did you hear that and how?
Actually, I had a conversation with Mr. Sirocco, who had a conversation with Ms. Laney and said that this was the preferred version of the plan. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. If that's not the case, then I'm wrong.
Maybe
I think
preferable to our planner, is that?
Yes, I think we should clarify that the board has not had an opportunity to weigh in.
Okay.
So I think,
It was discussed, and
Clarification.
what was meant was, it was more in line with the village look
Correct.
than that
Right,
we
and
were,
if I'm,
looking for.
Mr. Giannakis, if I misspoke, I apologize. Yep.
Just kind of curious.
So we do have Mr. Sirocco here to briefly talk about the height variance and also our planner. That we have only our planner left, and then Mr. Rocker would like to say a few words, and we will conclude our hearing. Again, there are no other variances associated with this site plan application. And with that said, I'd like to bring in Mr. Sirocco.
If we may, Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
a few predicate issues, just wanted to get them out of the way at the front end of this third hearing date. As council stated, this was carried from April 15 to this evening without further notice, and we did get an extension of time to act, and we do have that in writing, so I just want to reflect that on the record and thank council for same. Number 2, I just wanted to confirm on the record with Deb that all 5 of our board members who are here this evening on the dais are qualified to vote, having heard all 3 hearing, either having been present or heard the tapes or seen the video, so that they have qualified themselves. Is that
Yes.
correct?
That's correct.
Okay, we have certifications of same, and we'll have executed certifications for the record, should anyone so desire. So thank you for that. 5 is a quorum, and a majority of the 5 is required for this Phase 2 bifurcated proceeding, since the use variance relief was granted in the earlier phase. So we do have enough to hear and decide the application this evening. A simple majority, 3 out of 5 for passage, will be required at this second phase. Just for clarification for the board and members of the public. Bear with me. Otherwise, I don't think I had any other predicate issues, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Warner.
Thank you for keeping us legal.
Now, kind of comes with the
Yes, that
job.
title, yeah.
I'd like to just call Mr. Sirocco back up. He's already been sworn, and he's already identified his credentials at the last meeting.
Before we get started with your architect, one of my board members has some clarification questions, because he listened to the tape and he just had a couple of
Yeah,
questions.
sure.
I asked you, but you wouldn't answer it on the tape, I swear. I just want to make sure that a couple of things would be included in this
Sure.
project. Right now, there's tandem parking front to back for spots each.
Inside.
Inside. Who's ever going to get that, that's fine. Is there any, I'm looking about carbon monoxide removal and venting from those parking garages, so that it doesn't seep up into the bedrooms above. Is there, I didn't see anything, I didn't see any vents. I may not have seen, I'm not seeing the actual nuts and bolts of the architecture. I want to assume or make sure that that's in there, or make it a condition.
I don't know. I can ask Mr. Sirocco about that.
Okay, well, why don't you wait until then,
Yeah.
if that's an architect question.
Okay. Also, I didn't hear any discussion, or maybe I did, and my notes were just that I'm clarifying it for myself, electric charging stations?
Yes,
Yeah.
That was, sorry, that it was a note,
Yeah.
it's 6 weeks ago that I watched it,
yes,
so.
we will comply with the new law, yes.
Beautiful. And is there a bathroom for the downstairs, the common space for all of the residents, for no one else but the residents and their guests?
In that room, that comment. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
there was
there's a
one.
common room.
What were you, I know that Mr. Sirocco will talk about that as well, you can ask him.
Yeah, I believe
I'm
it
pretty
was.
sure we did, but don't quote me.
Okay, and last but not least, the 5-foot easement that's being granted to the township.
Yes,
I have an insurance background, insurance and liability. Who is that going to be borne by? What is,
so normally, and you can talk to your attorney about this, the way, if we grant an easement, then truthfully, someone falls and trips, they're gonna sue everybody.
yes, they,
And the bottom line is that we would have insurance language that the town would indemnify and hold us harmless from any liability, but people sue,
At the end,
Whoever.
any entity.
okay. So if the town, because we can't put this burden on the township, saying, you now have an easement because we said so. So if they choose not to accept the easement, then
Yeah,
it's moot.
I guess we have
correct?
to address that.
right?
Yeah, based on the township's acceptance of it.
Okay,
Yeah.
as long as we don't, foist anything on them,
Yeah.
then we're okay.
We can't make them do something if the town
Right.
refuses it.
Yeah, they'll make that determination whether they accept it or not.
And to clarify, the maintenance of the easement is whose responsibility?
The maintenance of the easement, remember what's gonna happen here is, Mr.
There's a
Giannakis,
fence
is
or
that
something.
the fence will be
Yeah.
on the inside.
Yeah,
And then there'll be that easement that Mr. Aranio was talking about, so it will be outside of our property. I thought that the town was gonna put some chips there or whatever, wood chips. I didn't think it was going to be my client's responsibility because it's outside the fence line. But, it's certainly something we can talk about.
yeah, I mean, the, what is on the ground of your property, even though there's an easement, and then who maintains it, I think should be known.
I don't want to jump in here, but I thought that I recall from, and I can check my notes from prior meetings, was that your client was okay with maintaining that.
That's what I remember too.
Okay.
I thought
He's
that
shaking
was-
his head yes.
Okay, okay.
But I
So
don't-
the answer is
I don't
okay.
remember whether it was gold bricks or
Platinum.
platinum.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
But my name has to be imprinted
Etched
on
them?
one of
Yeah,
those.
yeah.
Self bricks, yeah.
Selling bricks, right?
I mean, yeah, just as all the other surfaces have an identity of what they're made out of, even though that's outside the fence.
Right.
Is it wood chips or is it,
I thought that Mr. Aranio talked about wood chips. If it's something that you
Are we
want
talking about
different-
that now? I'm sorry, I don't mean to jump in, but is that our
Yeah.
topic right
I
now?
think so, unless it's, should be at a different point. in
Yeah,
the game. I don't
let's,
know.
hey, let's let the architect talk. We'll get to that easement further down, just
Yeah.
because I don't want to hold up your procedures.
Yeah.
Okay,
So let's get to your architect. Let's talk about the meat of the project. We'll get to the potatoes later.
Only because I have some thoughts on that.
Yeah,
right, and some
yeah, but
input.
I don't want to.
And exactly, I don't want to jump in and
I
take
don't
a
want to
tangent.
go off on the easement while
That's
we're.
right, I don't want to hijack your meeting and go in a different
Okay,
direction.
good.
That's what you
Share,
want.
it's fair.
And Mr. Sirocco, your license remains in good standing as an architect in the state of New Jersey, correct?
Yes, it is.
why don't you take the,
You can take the mic off of there, yeah, because it's portable. Right.
Mr. Sirocco, you were at the February 15, 2022 hearing, were you not?
Yes,
And at that hearing, you presented your architectural floor plans and elevations, correct?
yes,
And the elevation included sheet PB 100, which was the rendering of the building, correct?
yes,
And at that hearing, certain board members raised some concerns about the architectural rendering and asked that we make it more similar in style to the plan presented at the use variance application. Do you recall that?
yes,
And as a result of that hearing, the hearing was carried, and you were directed to work with the board's planner on architecture, she would act as a liaison between you and the board members relative to the design of that building, the redesign, correct?
yes,
And would it be fair to say that you've spent a considerable amount of time working with Ms. Laney to come up with a design which you believe will be supported and by the board?
Yes.
So after all that, you presented to the board A8 and A9, which are mounted, correct?
Yes.
Can you tell us which is A8 and which is A9?
Yeah, A8 is a, do you want me to just get into the description of them a little bit?
Tell us which
Just
one is A8.
A8 is a no height variance option that introduces some of the original elements from the previous, the other board submission design. So that was one approach that Liz and I worked at, was to try to incorporate what was originally approved by the board. So that's A8, and A9 is a option in which we introduce gables into the front end of the design of the building. And we also are seeking a C variance height, regarding height.
Well, if you could now turn to A8 and A9, can you talk about the architectural features of each of those?
Yeah, sure. So the first thing I should point out is that in the original design on PB 100 and the design in A8 and the design in A9, the building footprint, the massing of the drawings, everything remains exactly the same. There won't be any required revisions to the civil drawings. So we were careful to kind of work within the envelope that was already worked through, I believe to the satisfaction of the board, with Kathy's testimony on the civil end. So we were careful about that. Again, A8, we were trying to reintroduce some of those original elements in the original approval, and those include mansard roofs, which we introduce on the northwest corner of the building, and that would wrap around to the west side of the to the north side of the building. I'm sorry. And then we also introduce, with dormers, we introduce arch-top windows to kind of soften the aesthetic of the building, bring it into a more residential feel. So we introduce those arch-top windows there. And over the residential entrance to the building, we introduced another mansard, again with dormers for that nice living room on the top floor there.
Okay. A9?
A9 was a very different approach. Again, the geometry, the massing of the building is in line with the civil drawings and with the architectural plans. What we did here was we took the liberty to bring us up to a height of 39 feet, 5 inches. I'm sorry, 38 feet, thank you. 38 feet, 5 inches, which would keep us within a C variance. And that height increase is only at the peaks of the gables. We're going to have, in the front of the building, we'll have 1, 2, 3, and there'll be a 4th gable on the north side of the building. And then that height difference right there from the horizontal cornice line to the peak is our 3-foot 5-inch height variance. So we introduced gables there to get us into a much more residential feel. And then again, over the entrance, the residential entrance, we introduced another gable with dormers.
Okay. Mr. Grosskopf had asked a question about carbon monoxide. Have you given that any thought, and whether you have a response to his question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, of course. So if we go to PB 200 and we look at the first floor plan at the bottom of the page, all these 2-car garages, these tandem 2-car garages, spots here are required by building code to have carbon monoxide detection and carbon monoxide exhaust. It's basically a system that if the carbon monoxide builds up to a certain level, this fan automatically goes off and extracts. Our experience with these type of garages is that the fan very rarely goes off. You need quite a bit of carbon monoxide to trigger it, but the system will be in the building.
The other question was about a bathroom on the first floor because of the amenity space that we've provided. Do you have a response to that?
Yeah, so we didn't show one. For smaller buildings, we tend to drift away from that. People can just run upstairs and use the their own bathrooms in the apartments. But that's something I could speak to the applicant about. And we do have room we have a large storage room. I wouldn't want to take it out of the gym, and I wouldn't want to take it out of the lounge. So we could take a little space out of the storage.
I have
Yeah.
nothing further, Mr. Chairman, of Mr. Sirocco.
Experts?
Yeah, okay, so I just wanted to clarify
And
for the
you're still
board.
sworn in?
Yes, what exactly transpired. So after the hearing in February, Mr. Sirocco and I had a conversation, and when we went over everything the board had said, and we talked about the different points the board members had made, and we talked about, we looked at his website, which had been happened, if you remember, during the hearing, and we looked at, some of his projects that he's done in other communities that had been highlighted by the board. So Mr. Sirocco took it all under advisement, and he came back with a plan. And I shared it informally with the chair and vice chair, and they gave me their feedback, which was, it wasn't there yet. And so we had another conversation with Mr. Sirocco, and, we understood, our understanding, or my understanding from the board was it was intended to look more residential. That if you remember the proposed building that had been shown in February was a flat roof. It had sort of concrete, a base. People, I think, said it looked a little bit like
underneath the other picture.
Yeah, it looked a little like a bank. That the cornice was too heavy, and that while it might look good in certain environments, it wasn't appropriate for Long Hill and not appropriate at this location. So I think the feedback we gave back was, it needs to look more residential. What had been approved by this board in 2020, or the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, was a more residential look or feel. Is that me? I don't know.
Yeah, move your phone away from it, maybe, yeah.
Okay. A more residential look, more residential feel. So that's why Mr. Sirocco came back with the pitched roof, which would require a variance, not a D variance, but a C variance. And I shared it again very informally with the chair and vice chair, and we thought, well, now let's take it to the board. We're at a point where let's see what the board thinks and see if we're on the right track. And you'll see that what's being proposed now, it does have the pitched roof, and also the materials are a little softer. They're a little more residential.
Less brick, more.
The brick is, a red brick. There's hardy plank. There's the blue colored hardy plank. The cornice is not as heavy as it was in the original drawing. The windows have an arch at the top. It's supposed, the intention or our direction to Mr. Sirocco is to make it a lot, again, more residential. So I just wanted to make those clarifications on the record so people understand, what I had said to Mr. Sirocco was we think this is good enough now to give to the board, that there had been earlier iterations that we didn't think were there. So that's where we got to tonight. Not that I had done any sort of approval on behalf of the board.
You're good.
I just didn't understand what he was saying. Okay, I thought I missed the meeting.
No.
Yeah, so that's where we are.
Do you have any questions of the architect now?
I do not.
Okay. Does our engineer have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Okay. Board members, questions of the architect?
I have one.
Yeah.
I see that with these, both iterations, 8 turning into 9, A9, the roof line comes in. Does that impact the square footage inside that apartment? And I believe that's supposed to be a co-apartment?
Yeah, so what happened?
The one.
Oh, I'm sorry, this one here.
Well, you're going from, that was one option, which is kind of square, which was like the original. If you go to A9, which is to the right, that kind of looks like the first one looked like a bank.
Right.
Which is kind of like A8. Now, on the right is A9. So going from square, you're making it pitched. Does that take away from any interior space?
It doesn't take away square footed floor area. What it does is there'll be a small portion of these 1, 2, 3, 4, and this room here, where the ceiling will start pitching in at about 6'6" above the finished floor. So the floor area remains. It's just you lose a little, you don't get that 9-foot high ceiling all the way to the edge of this wall.
But do you still get a sufficient height in that floor area to constitute a room?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, I mean, probably 85% of that room would still be 9-foot high ceiling. There's a very small percentage of it. It's basically this area here, which is, I don't know, about 2 feet.
What's the shortest it gets?
The shortest, and what do you mean?
Well, the least, yeah, the shortest.
Oh,
the height
6'6"
from the
high.
ceiling.
It would, we would kick the rafter up, these gable rafters. Actually, it would be a little lower than that. It would be about, I'm sorry, I stand corrected. It would be about 4 foot high on the exterior, but inside, they would kick in at 6'6" as the rafter goes up.
So to the board members' question, the floor area is going to remain the same, and at the lowest, the ceiling will be 6'6" interior.
Yeah.
They're not losing any floor areas.
Right, right. It's just there's the 9-foot ceiling height isn't maintained for that entire floor area.
I'm sorry to
That's okay.
Yeah,
jump
okay.
in.
I hope I was
Right.
clear there. Okay.
Got it.
Any other questions of the
I
architect?
have a question.
Yes.
I remember at the last meeting, there was some talk about, I think they were the air conditioner exhaust vents facing the north. And there was questions as to whether or not they could be handled differently, and I don't know if that was looked at all.
So if I go back to the PB, let me just see which drawing it is. That's PB 300. The north elevation, we have these louvers for our HVAC units. And I could be mistaken, but I didn't remember they were necessarily an issue on this wall. But I think what I testified to is that they get painted the same color as the hardy plank siding around it.
So they'll blend in?
They're not noisy. They're not visually noisy at all. I mean, you look at all the projects we've done, they really don't stand out. And
How
then,
big are the vents, though?
they're about 2 foot by 3 foot.
Mr. Sirocco, you talked about magic packs in each unit, correct? That's what they are, which means that the air conditioning system is internal, other than for the retail space.
And for the front units, what we offered, well, this is the old elevation. Let me just go back to, for these front units, where we have all the articulations with the gables and things like that, the brickwork, we would have split systems, meaning there'll be a condenser on the roof, and there would be a air handler that would be in the interior of the unit. So there's no reason to have a louver on all these front units here. So
And those units would be buffered?
Yeah, those units are in the interior. Those might be near the front entrance door or, you know, somewhere in the interior of the unit, whereas the magic packs, because they're not split systems, meaning there's no compressor on the roof, they are required to have a louver and be on an exterior wall.
But the compressors in the front, they would be...
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, they would be, I believe we showed them on the roof plan. No, we didn't, we didn't show them on the roof, but they would be located near the elevator bulkhead, and they're about 3 feet high. So like the elevator bulkhead, they wouldn't be seen from the sight line from the street.
That's true even with the pitched roof?
No, it's a flat, well, first of all, this doesn't reflect the gables that we
The question really
introduced.
is that would be the same with the gable roof, correct?
Yeah, it would be the same with the
You'd still
gable
be able-
roof. Yeah. But just to be clear, the entire roof is still a flat roof. I mean, it looks, we just show the pitch, the 1/4 inch per foot pitch, but it's basically a flat roof still. Even in Exhibit 9, these gables would extend maybe 4 or 5 feet as an overframe over the flat roof, just to give the aesthetic of a gable, but it's still a flat roof.
Is A8 a conforming building height?
Yes,
And A9 requires a height variance?
a C variance, yes.
C variance. And what is the amount that it exceeds the current ordinance by?
3 feet 5 inches. And I should point out that it's only in the front portion of the building. The remaining, the entire, the 3/4 of the building behind this front showpiece is still within the 35-foot height.
Is it all 3 of those peaks in the front that require?
Well, there'll be a 4th one on the other side.
4 peaks.
It's all these 4 peaks, the 3 you see, and then the one on the other side.
And how about that one?
And then this one is also over the residential lobby. That's also a C variant. So there's really 5, I'll call them ornamental gables in the sense that they're not true roofed gables. They're just ornamental gables.
Thank you.
And the windows are the same height?
Yeah. The only thing we introduced were archtop transoms on, and we have the room in the 9-foot high ceiling. We have the room for that.
Any other questions for the architect?
Mr. Chairman, if there's no other questions from board members before we go to members of the public, I did have just one comment I wanted to make for the benefit of the board and the members of the public with respect to the alternative design options A8 and A9 before the board. The fact that A9 would require a variance is not quote-unquote problematic from a legal perspective. I wanted to assure the board because if indeed A9 requires a variance, being at 38.5, it's a C variance, it's not a D variance. And in my legal opinion, the notice was sufficient in that in the catch-all language that is in the notice, the board's jurisdiction over the matter to grant a C variance, if that is the board's desire, to A, approve the application, and B, go with Exhibit A9, the board has that jurisdiction to do so under the notice that was provided by the applicant. So it's a long-winded lawyer's way of saying, if you want to do it, you could do it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So didn't want that to impede the board's deliberative process.
All right. Okay, so we've exhausted questions from our experts and our board members and our attorney's comment. Do any member of the public have questions of this architect's testimony? Yes, come on forward. Come up to the, would you put the mic, give her the mic, please? Or put it on the stand? Or you can hand it to her, either one. Would you please identify yourself and tell us where you live?
Linda Parisi, 54 Plainfield Road. I am right next door.
If you're looking at the building, you're left?
To the left.
To the left, okay.
So question, when it was first brought...
Could you hold the mic closer to your mouth?
When it was first brought to the board, the plan that was shown was within the 35 feet. So is there a reason why it can't be now?
It still can be. We're just offering, so Exhibit A8, well, the original proposed was
Right.
within the height limitation,
Gotcha.
the height ordinance. A8 is
I think A8's the other one.
A8 is the other
Yeah,
one.
A8 is a
Mhm.
redesign, but it's still within the height ordinance. There was some discussing with Liz and looking at other projects, there was some discussion to introduce gables.
Right.
Meaning these triangles. And that basically, I made it very clear right from the beginning, if we introduce gables, we're
Then it
gonna need a
raises the
height
height.
variance. But the
Right.
height variance is limited to only the portion of the building that's right up against the street.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from members of the public?
Can I go back and ask you a question?
Sure, I was just gonna say
Yeah,
that, but
yeah.
wait a minute. Now, hearing no more questions from the public, I close it to the public. Go ahead, Jerry.
I just want to know your professional opinion on the three designs, because it doesn't matter what I think, because I'm not an architect, right? But personally, I think the first drawing, or the first rendition is beautiful. I mean, it's a beautiful building, no matter where you...
This one?
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like it fits in our town, but it's beautiful. So tell me about the different designs, including the first one.
Sure. So first of all, your opinion matters quite a bit.
No, I don't mean in the vote. I mean in the architectural...
Architects, if you read all the
professional, yeah.
architectural magazines, many of their opinions aren't so noteworthy. So I respect your opinion.
Hold the mic closer to you.
Oh, you want that on the record? I'm not repeating it. You know, I walk into situations, clients ask me to do a project. I get a sense of the environment, the immediate environment. I get a sense of the town. I get a sense of what the client might be looking for, what the nature of the building is. And my immediate gut reaction was this proposed here, which we spoke about at our last hearing. It's a strong building. It's definitely a strong building. And I just felt that on that street there, there's a lot going on there, and I think we had to make a statement on the street, and that was my personal opinion. My client didn't tell me to design this. It was my opinion. It was my reaction after kind of absorbing all the different elements of putting a building together, and I feel strongly about this building still. Now, there's many ways to make a handsome building. There's not just one way. And I feel that even though I feel stronger, I feel closer to the original one, I think the town and I think the applicant and I myself am happy with the other two alternates also. I think they're all just handsome buildings.
Which one looks better over time? In 35 or 40 years, which one is going to look best?
I think, I mean, you're going to get a very prejudiced opinion. I mean, but, you know, and Liz and I, we have differences of opinions, and Liz brought into our Zooms one of her associates, and she had very strong opinions. And I'm very comfortable with the original one. I think it's a building that adds character to the town and makes a strong statement in the town. And I don't believe it because of the landscaping, because of the way it's positioned on the site. I don't think it really is a detriment to the neighbors, to the residential neighbors. I think it's distinguishing itself from the neighbors. Whereas this one is trying to get more in line with the character of the other houses.
Mr. Sirocco,
This is my opinion.
The question was really from a maintenance perspective.
Oh,
which
maintenance.
one will last longer? Which one will be?
The Hardy Plank's an excellent product. You know, all this siding here, the vertical side, it's an excellent product. It lasts a very, very long time. It's by no means vinyl siding, and it doesn't have the maintenance problems that wood siding has. So will it last as long as brick? No, but will it last 30 years? Absolutely.
All right, one more question, and this might be a little bit drifting farther from the point, but again, in the face of time, down the road, 30, 40 years, architecture, how does the peaks and stuff, which are becoming, I think, more common, and it seems like every town that has affordable housing issues and has to whack up 1,400 units immediately goes with all these peaks and stuff, and, you know, are we going to look like split levels? No offense to anybody who owns one or built one or whatever. Is that what it's going to look like in 30 years?
I mean, it's very hard to imagine what our built environment's going to look like in 30 years. Technology is changing dramatically, which has an effect on the aesthetics of buildings. So it's a little bit of a loaded question. You know, it's a little difficult to answer, but this is definitely more of what's being built in and around the area in this part of Jersey.
That's your point to A9.
Yeah, A9, yeah, and, you know, that's what I'm saying, this one could it could just be there, and it'll be there for a long time, and it's gonna hold its own.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions?
No, I just wanted to say, just another clarification point. The professionals had a pre-meeting, all the professionals, back in January maybe. And when Mr. Scirocco came up, I said, oh, I think your building's beautiful, it's great. So he came into the meeting in February, and nobody agreed. Nobody on the board agreed.
I mean, I think it was more toward because we had seen something a little less commercial, more residential looking, that we wanted to see some other options, which I think is important for the board to look at all the different potential of how the building would look. Because it does make an impression on the property. It's gonna be one of the largest buildings in the area. So you wanna make sure that the neighbors like it, that it blends in, it doesn't look like it sticks out. Any other questions? No? Okay.
I just have Mr. Kyle as my last witness.
Okay. And he is your planner?
Yes.
Yes, and
Did I swear you in at the prior meeting, Mr. Scott?
I don't remember, Mr. Warner, so let's do it again.
Do you swear to God or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
And your credentials as a planner are?
Sure. I have a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Planning and Design from Rutgers, which I received in 1996. I've been a practicing planner for 25 years. I've appeared before and been qualified as an expert by over 240 boards in the state, including an appearance here, as well as in front of the planning board. I'm licensed by the state as a professional planner. I'm also a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners.
Okay, and your licenses are current?
It is, and I just renewed it. So.
Right, okay, you're an expert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kyle, can you just start by telling the board what you did to prepare for this hearing, and then I'm going to let you run with the rest of your testimony.
So our office has been involved in this project since its inception. My partner, Elizabeth McManus, appeared on the use variance phase, but I had been involved in the project all along, from design to the initial approval of the use variance and then into the site plan phase. I've been to the site a number of times, including driving by there this evening. I've reviewed all the master plan documents for the township as well as the zoning ordinance. So the issues that we have before the board this evening, again, this was a bifurcated application where the board approved a use variance back in late 2020, early 2021. The municipal land use law in section 76B requires that when we bifurcate an application and we seek site plan after that use variance is approved, that we have to address the negative criteria again when we come back for the site plan. There are also two waivers. As Mr. Lehrer said, we did eliminate one of those. There are two waivers that we're seeking. The first is related to the percentage of the parking area that has landscaping. 5% is required. We're at about plus or minus 2%. We also have, and I'll show it on the site plan.
And this was already marked in as an exhibit, right?
It was. This was the plan that was entitled Site Revisions. It's drawing number PB4. And the issue for the other design waiver is that we have a trash enclosure that is here in the, we'll call it the northwest corner of the parking area. There's a retaining wall that you see as a dark gray line that runs around the perimeter here. Since we have a fence, trash enclosure that is on top of that wall, the way that the ordinance is written is we have to take the height of the wall and the fence together. So we're seeking a waiver to provide 10 feet, so it's a 4-foot wall with a 6-foot fence, where 6 is the maximum. 6 feet is the maximum that is permitted. So let me first start, and we'll address the negative criteria on the site plan. So I want to just note that, again, we're not here talking about the negative criteria necessarily for the use variance itself. We're not kind of relitigating that part of the application. We're really focusing on, now that the site plan is fully engineered, is there any substantial detriment to the public good, which means impact to adjacent properties, and is there any substantial impairment to the intent and purpose of the zone plan and zoning ordinance now that we've fully engineered the site plan. We are also going to address the enhanced quality of proof on the negative criteria as well. So there was a case on point with this exact matter, and it was a case called Meridian v. Wall Township Zoning Board of Adjustment. There, Meridian, it was an assisted living facility. It was a conditional use variance, and the court concluded essentially that once you're granted a use variance, the use is deemed permitted. And that's why, as Mr. Warner indicated at the beginning of the hearing, we're not doing this where we need 5 affirmative votes on the negative criteria for the site plan. It's just a simple majority of the members that are present as long as we have a quorum. So, again, we're not going to go back and revisit the use issues itself. We've already decided that. So in terms of the first prong of the negative criteria and any potential impact to adjacent properties, it's worthwhile to note that with few exceptions, this plan is pretty much identical to what the board saw when we were here for the use variance back in 2020 and 21. There were some minor modifications that we went through over time, but it's essentially the same plan. And this is important when we think about the negative impact, potential negative impact, because these were things that we well understood at the time that the board considered the use variance. We haven't changed much since then. We've also worked to provide you with 2 options for the building for consideration. You know, there was a lot of discussion at the last meeting about the architecture and the character of this area and getting a more residential feel. So we've provided what we think are 2 good options, one of which, of course, requires a height variance for your consideration. It's also important to note, as we talked about, the retail space has been reduced in area. With that comes a reduction in the amount of traffic that we would see from that retail use. We've also kept the same amount of parking that we had on the original plan, but reduced that retail space. So we do have a little bit of a cushion there. We're providing a little bit more parking than is required, but we did talk about that issue as well at the last hearing, and I think the feeling was, let's leave the parking so that we don't come up, you know, with a shortfall there, and that was a benefit. The lighting plan complies with all the ordinance standards, so there's no potential impact now that we've fully engineered it of that lighting on adjacent properties. We've also talked about, you know, with Mr. Poliniak, we went out and collected some additional traffic data at the board's request. We looked at those issues. It was his opinion that the site driveway functions adequately, and then we can address, you know, those congestion issues that we do get on Plainfield Road at times. So from a traffic perspective, there's no impact or substantial impact now that we've engineered the site plan. As we talked about at the last hearing on the site plan, we're providing significant buffering along both the north and south property lines. This building comfortably complies with all the required setbacks for the district. So you can see that to the southern setback, we're well within that required building setback, as well as to the north. So in terms of any, you know, site plan standards that we're held to, we're complying with all the bulk standards for the zone. So the building complies, no coverage variances, you know, no intensity variances, FAR, anything like that. So this fully complies. So I think overall, given where we've come with the site plan, the discussions that we've had, the architectural options that we've presented, I think in reviewing this, it's my opinion that there is no substantial impact to the adjacent properties now that we've fully engineered the site plan. Now, in terms of the second prong, the intent and purpose of the zone plan, it's my opinion that the site plan does not undermine the zoning now that we've fully engineered it. The first floor is consistent with uses that are permitted in the district. So, you know, we have this commercial use on the front part of the building that is consistent with the zone requirements. And as we testified to at the use variance phase, you know, as we look at how the township's planning documents have evolved, you know, there's been a lot of drafts that have, you know, gone through. Mr. Aranio alluded at the last hearing the direction that, you know, the township is sort of leaning towards as those drafts have evolved, and the downtown master plan element. That envisions kind of a commercial corridor, vibrant, pedestrian-oriented. And really, when we look at the inclusion of residential uses in this building in a mixed-use fashion, it really is going to help support that. You know, downtown is not just simply about commercial uses and people walking around. It's important to have residents there that support those businesses, essentially 24/7. So having those residences there in a mixed-use environment is good. It's not inconsistent with that vision that's expressed there. And we also have to talk about the fact that while this project is not in the township's affordable housing plan, it will provide 3 units. Now, whether those go to the current round of compliance or whether they're carried over to the 4th round, there's a benefit to the township. They're going to be rental affordable units, so there's a possibility that 3 bonus credits could accompany those units for a total of 6 credits. Looking at the vision statement for the downtown, part of that is also to provide an economically sustainable commercial center that provides options. So when we look at this, this project is not inconsistent with that. The other part of this, and I have to go here for this. So when we look at the Medici enhanced proof, and just to remind the board, the case that's cited, it's Medici v. BPR, and what the court said in that case was that on the negative criteria for a D1 variance, the applicant has to demonstrate what's called an enhanced quality of proof, and that's that the grant of the variance is not inconsistent with the intent and purpose of the zone plan, essentially reconciling the fact that that use is not listed among those permitted. I think as we look at the Downtown Valley Commercial District Master Plan element, all the affordable housing considerations, many of the discussions that we've had over the course of this case, this is really not inconsistent. It achieves a lot of the planning goals that are expressed in those elements. It provides affordable housing opportunity, essentially in a mixed-use downtown environment, which is appropriate. It puts people in close proximity to employment and services. So I think as far as reconciling it, it really goes back to everything that we talked about at the use variance phase, that this fits in with the zoning scheme, it fits in with the vision for this area of the township. So in my opinion, I think that the variance can be reconciled, particularly now that we've fully engineered the site plan. We're essentially where we were with the site plan at the time the use variance was approved. Really nothing's changed, significantly or substantially with the site plan. So I think the variance can still be reconciled now that we've fully engineered the site plan. As far as the waivers, again, I've identified those 2. The standard here is slightly different than what we would typically consider for a bulk variance. And this comes out of the municipal land use law. It's 40:55D-51A. And really, we're not addressing positive and negative criteria. The standard here is one of reasonableness. So given the facts, is the grant of the waiver reasonable? And there was a court case, it's called Garofalo v. Burlington Township, and the court found in that case that waivers must simply be reasonable under the facts, and it's just an acknowledgement by the board that the condition is satisfactory relative to the requirements of the ordinance. So Ms. Muller did provide significant testimony on the difficulties in meeting that standard. So if we look at the trash enclosure and the fence, the trash enclosure needs to be in that corner of the property, keep it away from the parking in a place that's accessible. We want to have that fenced enclosure to have those dumpsters within that fence so they're not visible and screen them. So really, it's a practical difficulty in meeting this standard. If we could put this dumpster enclosure somewhere else on the site, we could easily meet this if we didn't need that fence atop the wall. So I think there is a practical difficulty in meeting that standard. Likewise, with the landscaping within the parking area, as you can see, this is essentially a half of a bay of parking. We have the garage spaces on the north side. So there's really limited area and opportunity for us to include significant landscape islands where we could meet this. And essentially what we've done is taken that landscaping and pushed it out to the periphery of the property. So we're providing additional landscaping in those locations, just not in the islands that are there. So I think given the site design and the discussion that we had on parking at the last hearing, it really presents a practical difficulty in meeting that standard. But again, the board is getting that landscaping on the periphery of the project as opposed to in those landscape islands. And then finally, let me just address, in case the board does decide to go with the A9 option, the criteria for the bulk variance for the height. Again, this is just under the 10% that would kick this to a D variance. And as Mr. Sirocco said, we're at 38 feet 5 inches. So on the positive criteria, I think is a general welfare benefit, which is purpose A of the municipal land use law, and also purpose I, which is to promote a desirable visual environment. So the discussions that we've had surrounding the architectural options is, one that's a little more in keeping with the village character, one that has a little bit more residential character, and this building design and the grant to the variance would achieve that. So there's a visual benefit and an overall benefit to the project, again, at the board's pleasure. If you decided that that's an option that fits better because of the visuals, then I think it's justified under purpose A and purpose I. In terms of any negative criteria impact, as Mr. Sirocco pointed out, we're not here seeking 38 feet 5 inches for the entire building. It's really those gable features that we've put in the front of the building. So the fact that we also meet the underlying setbacks and then also provide additional cushion of setback, I think there's not much chance that there would be a substantial impact from the additional 3 feet 5 inches that we're seeking. Typical concerns, and to the second prong of the negative criteria, although it's not expressly discussed as to the justification for a 35-foot height limit, it's generally intended to address the municipal land use law purpose of adequate light, air, and open space. So we want to make sure that if we're increasing the height of buildings, it's not negatively impacting adjacent properties, which, shading, shadowing, it's too close, things like that. So I think here, that general intent is met because we do meet all the setbacks for the zone and then some. So that additional height is more than compensated for because we're actually providing more than the required side yard setbacks in this area. So I don't think there'll be any substantial impact to adjacent properties as a result. Again, it's not the entire building, just the front, and there won't be any substantial impairment to the intent of that height limitation. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman, in the way of direct. I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Our experts, have any questions?
I do not, Mr. Chairman.
I do not have any questions.
Okay. Board members, any questions of their planner? Yes.
I heard you say a couple of times that there's no significant difference of this plan that you're presenting now from the original site plan approval that was for the use of the property, right? Now, and it only came of last meeting, I think, of this talk about the easement on the north side. Would that be a significant difference from the original approval?
No, I don't think so. And I think the site plan, when we look at negative criteria for site plan on a bifurcated application, if we came through the door and had a design that was, say, completely different than what you saw at the site plan, I think that presents a problem. I'm saying, generally speaking, we're pretty much in line with what we had originally presented. I think the easement was more of something that we discussed, for pedestrian access, and it's something that, really came up out of the discussions and questions from the board. So I don't think that's a substantial change, and if anything, it was a benefit, because it was something that the board had expressed the desire to have that we were able to provide.
Does it change the side yard setbacks when there's an easement in place? I don't know if there's a legal question.
No. There would be no, if there's no dedication of property, then the lot lines are not changing, and therefore the setbacks should not be changing. But I'll defer to planner and engineer, particularly since both are nodding in the affirmative.
Yes,
Okay.
I agree. Yes,
I just want to make sure that another, allowance wasn't necessary.
Yeah, and I guess we should pose the question to the applicant's planner. In fairness, would it change the magnitude of the or setbacks, and possibly even call into question an encroachment and a requirement for additional variance relief?
No, I don't believe it does.
And then, did I miss how the easement's going to be handled as far as material or maintenance?
I think that's a discussion that Mr. Aranio wants to have later.
Yeah, we were going to discuss
I didn't know who on your side was going to do it. The architect didn't do it. I didn't hear.
I think we're waiting to hear what Mr. Aranio has to say.
Oh, okay.
I'll say it now. I mean,
go ahead.
Since we talked about it the last time, whenever that was, February or March or something like that, I've been observing, I'll call them like little pedestrian cut-throughs or passageways. We have a couple in our town. They're paved, and they're also maintained in different weather. I know this one is not, we don't have the full easement, so it just a road to nowhere, we'll call it for right now. But if this is built, presumably the property next door will be built, because the guy next door is going to say, I can get more than $1,500 a month in rent. I can get now $50 million for a building, or whatever you guys charge for a building, So he's gonna probably do something there, right? So we're gonna get that extra 8 feet or whatever. Let's assume that's on the come. So if we build something, it should be built to last and it should be safe. So a wood chip path, I think, is insufficient for the purpose here. We're gonna try to move people about town, like your planner said. It's interconnectivity and we're mixing commercial and downtown and everything. If we're going to use it, it should be built the right way. It should be maintained. I've seen it in other towns where people use those pedestrian cut-throughs or passageways between properties, and it sounds great. I like the wood chips. I don't like a lot of pavement, you can probably tell that, but if we're gonna have it, we kinda have to pave it. I don't like paving the woods, but if we're gonna, build 40-unit buildings in the woods, we should probably make the path the right way.
Can I ask a scenario? The way I understand it is that if this would be a condition, but it would only become a reality if the neighbor were able to
Property
get...
allowed.
Well, see,
Right.
that, I'm also thinking no now, like, this should happen right away. This should be part of you're gonna have machines there. It's going to be a small thing to, level a sidewalk, essentially.
But
I guess if...
But the neighboring property, they can't put something
That's
through the
right.
neighbor.
It goes
Correct.
to nowhere.
But, so it goes to, they have all but the last few feet to get to Poplar Avenue. That's the objective is. So people from the Little League field, the shop and everything else can get to
Or
this.
people from this complex can get to the shop.
Correct, or what we call like the unfolding downtown, right? Eventually, it's gonna be there. You'll see that when you do, if you ever did a site plan with a subdivision, you do a partial sidewalk, right? Because you're building out that area.
Yeah.
And then when the next property develops, you build the rest of the sidewalk. And the
Right.
same thing happens with the road and the utilities and everything else. That's how it's done.
We have
So-
many curbs that are handicap accessible, and it's just this little
Thing in the
area
middle of
at the
nowhere.
corner, for the
Correct.
sidewalk.
Correct. That is true, but in my analogy, it's a little bit closer to this in that you're actually building a subdivision, right? And in that subdivision, you are building the sidewalks and the improvements, we'll call it. Whatever the improvements are that go along with that site plan work is done. It's conducted at the time.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Aranio? And it's not my client's not going anywhere. So he has been around in a long time, knows Long Hill for a long time, built in Long Hill a long time. And so he's gonna manage this site, he's gonna own it. If that comes to fruition, that where the neighbor grants that additional space, my client will build it.
I have no doubt.
Right.
I have no doubt about the integrity of your client, but things change. Ownership changes. I mean, we've seen that in this town. We've played out things where soccer field access was promised by someone who built 170 houses, and then later on said, nope, you can't have the access. So, we have lots of property.
Yep.
We have a recreation, problem that we need space to recreate, and we can't access it, right?
But follow my logic. Follow my logic. Is that
we've seen this movie before, is what
No,
I'm saying.
what I'm saying is that
Yeah.
it just logistically, my client's gonna put a fence that's 5 feet inward, build that fence, and you're asking him to also build something that's gonna go to nowhere for maybe forever. I guess the question is, if you make it a condition, and he owns an apartment building, it's not as though it's a single-family home. Whoever, that runs with the land. If you want to put that in a deed restriction, that it runs with the land, I have no problem, but the logic, I'm trying to follow the logic of installing it now when you don't have the neighboring property agreeing.
All right, let me ask you a question. Have you ever done any, subdivisions, like residential housing?
Sure.
And
but
were
that's part
sidewalks
of-
required?
That's part of the subdivision requirements.
Right.
This was a request to put an easement on.
Right, but you're also getting variances and stuff that we don't have, which is
There's no-
40
there's no
unit
variance.
buildings. We don't have that
I
sort of
understand, the
thing.
variance on height is something that's
It's on the
caused-
whole concept. It's like the whole,
Yeah.
But I think what you're saying is if he builds it now, it'll have to be maintained, and if it isn't, it could deteriorate, or it potentially has a potential to
Well, that's
deteriorate.
true.
So what you're suggesting is, we may put it as a condition, but to be built when it is viable to be accessed.
I don't think my client has a problem with the materials you're talking
Yeah,
about.
no, I understand.
Yeah. I agree too, but then would it be bonded? I mean, would we do some kind of bond for that?
You could have even something even more, which would be, if you want to record something that would call it a contingent easement, that would say, in the event that such and such a person grants the neighboring property on Lot 6, grants an easement, then we will install. It assures.
section of it.
Yeah,
See, I'm thinking that it should be done now. It should be done as part of the
I
project.
understand what you're saying, Jerry. The only problem with doing it now is that it now then has to be maintained for no reason, because no one's using it, and
Well, I think people will use it except for the last few feet, and then you're talking about a dirt path.
Yeah, but
It's already there. The dirt path is already there, the last few feet.
The dirt path
It's
is
already there. People already go through there, yeah.
Oh, okay. I just don't want it to make it a hazard where at the end of this easement, there's less than a viable way to get there.
Right.
But you're saying from your observation that there's already.
People travel through there, but they seem to go over a brook that's there.
Okay.
And not straight east towards this
Okay.
property.
Okay.
But a little bit north towards the next property.
Oh, okay.
That's what
All
they
right.
seem to do.
I also have some concerns on the material for the pathway, because part of this path would be required to be through a wetland and a wetland transition area, and I'm
Yeah,
sure.
It's from,
Yeah,
you can see, this is the wetland transition area boundary.
it's a significant
About the
portion.
first third is
Yeah, so
outside
I
that.
do have concerns
Okay.
about the material, because the DEP does allow for pathways, recreational.
But it would be
and
more
otherwise.
like wood chips and things
No, I
like
think
that.
it's a
I am-
raised boardwalk. Raised boardwalk.
Raised
No, that's true.
boardwalks are options.
Natural material.
They're natural materials. They generally do not, particularly in the wetland area,
Right.
they would
So
not
whatever you have to
be
build.
supportive of
yeah, fair
of
enough.
a pathway. There are other options. There's, you can do like grass pavers,
Pervious.
which, kind
Right.
of.
Yeah.
Pervious
I'm not sure
pavers.
about if pervious pavement would fly with the DEP.
But pervious brick with the holes through them.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I
we call
meant,
those
the-
grass pavers too.
Yeah, okay.
So some options, so I just wanted to put that out there, that I don't think
Yeah,
that they would be
so
able to get
I would
permitted
be
a solid
totally
pathway.
flexible on that, whatever would be permitted, but I think to get it done now is the important thing, because otherwise it'll probably never happen.
You had said you had spoken with your client?
He raised the same question that your engineer
okay.
is about the wetland areas that we
Yeah.
really can't pave on.
No, and I don't think,
I think the material would be dictated
Yeah.
by the DEP.
I don't think
which
pavement is the prettiest thing
That's
either.
true,
I mean,
yeah.
it cracks and it probably needs more maintenance.
Just give me one second.
Yeah.
Do you really want to do that without the town's attorney? I don't know if I want to take on the liability.
Well, we would make that part of the permit. This is to be built based upon the town's approval.
What do you just think?
Yeah.
Oh, I know, I don't want that.
No, it would be on condition of the town saying, yes, we'll accept. Yeah. Might have to be a bridge over the line.
Yeah,
It's
they
off-
can have
off the
confirm,
record,
yeah. You don't have to take a 10-minute break.
Yeah,
and
everybody take a break so we can have a conference call.
Yeah.
Would you ladies like another?
Thank you.
Sure.
You don't have a sweet tip? I'll have another one.
Oh, yeah.
Catch. Oh, short.
I'll try it for the major leagues.
Darts.
Thank you.
Yep. Gentlemen? I got another.
So, if I could just say two things. One is, my client's willing to install the pavement. The maintenance of that, though, is really something I'm gonna have to work out with the town attorney.
Yeah.
Because and then whatever the DEP allows,
In that area.
Material.
we'll do that. But
Thank you. I think that's beyond the scope of this board anyway.
I
the
agree,
maintenance, yeah,
I agree, but
think
the
it is.
maintenance issue, I can't really
Yeah.
tell this board that my client's gonna maintain that when it's doing nothing.
Right.
And so I have to work that out with the town attorney.
Okay.
What's your opinion on that?
I mean, I guess the acceptance of the easement is subject to the governing body anyway, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Who's gonna shovel it?
We could potentially have a condition of approval, but that doesn't obligate other entities to accept.
Correct. And the engineer is correct about the materials. We would have to get permitted for it by the DEP.
In that area there.
Yeah, in that area.
Could it be a condition of approval to build it and the maintenance be worked out with the town separately? I mean, we're talking about the maintenance, not the actual dedication of an easement, right?
But if the town, but they're saying if the town doesn't agree to maintain it, they don't want to be stuck with it.
Somebody's got to agree to maintain it, and somebody's got to agree to accept the easement. Right.
Correct.
And that somebody's not the board.
Right, right.
It's the governing body on behalf of the
So
town.
the issue of maintenance and whether
Excuse
they'll
me,
accept it is really not within, I agree, not within your purview.
Right.
And I'll have to deal with the town attorney on the issue.
Okay.
It'll be a negotiation between my client and the town. But
I
we'll
think,
negotiate in good faith, I can tell you that, Mr. Ramonte.
I have no doubts.
I think the idea that Jerry is expressing is something that the township likes the idea of people not walking on Valley Road, not walking on main streets.
Understood.
Plainfield Avenue or Valley Road, because Plainfield Avenue will not be sidewalked the entire thing. So if we can get people to take internal paths such as this easement, it'll reduce the pedestrian traffic conflict. So, that's one of the benefits of it.
I agree. That's the whole purpose for me.
Yeah, because internal pathways that people can walk on is always more desirable than shoulders of roads or, especially major roads like these two. Any other questions of their planner? No.
I have one
Yeah,
before
go
we go to
ahead.
the public, if
Yes.
I may, Mr. Chairman.
I knew it.
Mr. Kyle only won this time.
Okay.
Yeah, the no multi-parts, I don't think. We'll see what happens. You mentioned the C variance relief if Exhibit A9 architecture is chosen for the C variance for the bulk, for the height of the gables. You mentioned some purposes A and I, general welfare, desirable visual environment for the positive criteria. I don't want to make any assumptions beyond just the purposes. I assume your position is the benefits substantially outweigh the detriments with respect to that bulk variance relief if it's required and Exhibit A9 is chosen as the architecture option if there's an approval. And if so, are you relying on the Kaufman case and the Pullen v. South Plainfield case that the benefits of the total project substantially outweigh the detriments?
Yes.
Then I guess I'm not presuming anymore. I'm just that
No,
now I have an answer.
I should have mentioned that under the C2 analysis that really the goal is do the benefits outweigh the detriments. That's one of the parts of the test for a C2, which is how we're approaching it. And the case that you mentioned, the Pullen case, basically says don't look just at the individual benefit of a particular variance, but look at the project as a whole and the benefits of the project as a whole. So I would agree that that standard is met as well.
Members of the public, do you have questions for the architect?
Yeah, planner.
I mean, the planner, I'm sorry. Members of the public? No, none? Okay. Anybody on Zoom?
We do have one person on Zoom.
I forgot to ask about that.
Well, we didn't before, literally
They
one
just
person
appeared.
just appeared.
Okay, do they have any questions of the planner?
Now would be the time to raise your hand, the person on Zoom, if you have any questions. Going once, twice. Nope.
I
Close
do
to the
have
public.
one more. Mr. Rocker would like to say a few words before we
Can he
conclude.
come up? He can sit down right
Sure,
here. next
Mr.
to you. The
Rocker.
microphone works.
Before we conclude our case.
Sure, no, I didn't presume you were concluding or not concluding. I just was
No,
making sure the public got their say.
And I don't
Everybody.
recall if I swore you in previously, Mr. Rocker, so if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear to God or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I'm not really going to testify much, just going to say a few words.
Just please give us an address or business address is fine.
I'll give you 171 Liberty Corner Road, and that's Far Hills. But it's, actually, I live in Bernards Township. My mailing address is Far Hills, and my mail gets delivered by Bedminster.
Wow, that's confusing.
So that's why every now and then I have, not infrequently have a limo in my driveway waking up, and I'm usually not going anywhere. I'm trying to find some, and I'm also told by FedEx that I've gotten packages I've never see. So it's an interesting place to be, but it's beautiful and I love it. So in any case, I wanted to take the opportunity to thank the board and the professionals as well as my own team for everything everybody's done, continued efforts in making this project design the best that it can be up to this minute. There are a few new faces on the board, but several members, including the chairman, have been on this journey with us for several years now. When I look at the current site, 44 Plainfield Road, and I imagine the potential for what we've proposed and designed together, I can't help but remain very excited about being involved in it and fortunate to be involved in it potentially. While it's been a long run for all of us, I firmly believe that this process, although challenging in many ways, works and works well. The evolution of this application and the related site and architectural details could not have excelled to the extent that it has, in my opinion, without everybody's cooperation and contributions, for which I am grateful to all. As I told the board in the past, several years back, I'm just a local builder from Liberty Corner with nearly 40 years of experience in construction and real estate development. My partner, Brian, who's here tonight, I met 25 years ago when he was 15. I built his dad's house, who's a local physician in Warren, and we've stayed close all these years. I built my business through dedication to craftsmanship, strong and honest client and professional relationships, and a love for putting pieces of puzzles together that take projects from inception to the finish line. It's kind of a virus being a GC in an interesting way, but I've enjoyed it. I'm someone who personally manages and owns the commercial projects that I've built, and I stand behind everything I do accordingly. My resume is simply a list of addresses and phone numbers of my projects, clients and professionals who have gotten to know me throughout. This project is in my hometown backyard, I'd call it, where I've always spent a lot of time, local businesses and restaurants. I love the town, and I can confidently assure everybody here that my commitment to executing every aspect of the project, should it be approved moving forward, will be as strong or stronger as any that I currently or prior have taken on. This project design, along with our capabilities as luxury craft-oriented builders, will combine to create a captivating small community that I firmly believe, when completed, will make everyone here proud to drive past while reflecting on these meetings and this process. Lastly, if God willing we can get up and running at the site, I would encourage all the board members, associated professionals, and neighbors to reach out to me directly anytime, day or night, for any reason at all. I'd love to get to know some of you a little bit better and extend an invitation to all to stay involved and watch something special take shape. At the end of the day, there's pretty much a piece of most of the board members in this plan. We certainly tried our best to incorporate everybody's voice in the final design, and I appreciate that. So thank you all again sincerely. I appreciate everybody's time and efforts, and that's all I really have.
Thank you. Thank you. Does any member of the public have a question for Mr. Rocker?
Mr. Chairman, we represent Mr. Golden, who is identified as an objector.
Yes. Yes, certainly, certainly. I've been waiting for you. You haven't said anything. Yeah, we will, as soon as he...
Mr. Chairman,
how long, we're coming upon our break time. How long will you be?
I wasn't intending to be more than a couple of minutes.
Fine. I just didn't want to cut you short, so, okay, go ahead.
May I pass out two documents that will
Sure.
aid the couple of minutes I need?
Sure.
Before you do, I'm sorry, your name and exactly who you represent again?
Right.
Jordan Friedman of Vastol and Sullivan, and we represent T. Golden. He owns 2 properties on Metzler and 1 property on Walnut.
Okay. Okay, and these are for questioning of this witness, or are these for an objector's case?
Just for questioning of the witness.
Okay, thank you. And we'll mark them as exhibits. I don't recall us having any O exhibits yet. Am I-
These were the same exhibits that were presented
With the use
some
variance?
time ago.
For the use, are these the same or different?
One of them is the same. That is the complaint response form. I believe that the federal...
Well, let's mark them again anyway.
Yeah, let's, did
Just
we,
mark 'em fresh.
did we mark either of these exhibits in this?
I don't recall.
Not in this, not in this
this
hearing.
phase?
No, we
Bear
haven't.
bear with me, please, Mr. Chairman. In this phase of the proceedings?
No.
No? Okay. So this will be O1 and O2 with the chair's permission, and we'll have you identify each one, Mr. Freeman, when we get a moment to do so. Maybe you can tell us what O1 is and O2 is.
Hold on, because everyone hasn't gotten them yet.
Yep.
Let everyone have them first. Take one and pass it down.
There is the mayor's bathroom right behind us.
Yeah, you have to,
So,
oh,
I got to read.
well, he assumed, I assume you assumed a 9-member board, so we probably have extra, right?
Well, truth be told, I copied them for the April meeting, and then in my getting ready for tonight, I just did it by rote, and I have all these extra copies.
So now that the board members have them, which one's O1, which one's O2, and please identify them for the record.
Certainly. Sequentially, the first document should be the letter of interpretation. That is part of the applicant's submission. It is online, but I don't have a problem if it's also marked as O1.
Is that it starts with the State of New Jersey Department of
It's the
Environmental...
DEP LOI, correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Oh, that's O1?
Right, it's dated, there are 2 dates on there, January 13th, 2020, and January 23rd, 2020.
Okay. And then the other one is O2.
Oh, yes, and O2 is an OPRA request, which provided a copy of a complaint response form.
And this was what you presented at the use variance hearing, O2.
Correct.
Yes. Okay.
And the date on O2 is?
November 20th, 2020.
Here we go. That's the...
The OPRA request was November 20th, 2020, and the response is dated, if you look at the second page, December 2nd, 2020.
Thank you. Okay, now that we have them identified for the record, with the chair's permission, I believe you could ask Mr. Rocker questions.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rocker, the letter of interpretation issued by DEP, I'm going to presume it's a document you have some familiarity with? Okay. And on page 2 of the letter of interpretation, DEP wrote, when it issued the wetlands delineation, should additional information be disclosed or discovered, the division reserves the right to void the original letter of interpretation and issue a revised letter of interpretation. I see you're not looking at the document, but would you accept that I read that correctly?
That's what the language says, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, the document that's been marked as O2 was part of an Oprah request response that was submitted to our client. And the document...
Was submitted by your client, you mean?
I'm sorry?
You said to your client, you mean by your client?
No, the response.
No, the response was issued to our
okay.
client.
But in response to your client's request?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So O2 consists of an Oprah request form that was submitted by our client and the production submitted back to him. And on the second page of O2, it says in the top left-hand corner, complaint response form. Do you see that?
Yes, but you have the date wrong. You said December 2, 2020. It's actually
No,
March 17, 2020.
What I said was, in the bottom left-hand corner, that's the date of the response. Ms. Kuntz produced it on December 2nd.
Oh, but the document's dated March 17, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. All right. Now, do you recall this document being presented and identified during the use variance application?
I don't recall specifically, but I don't doubt that it happened. It's on the
Okay.
record.
All right. Now, do you see at the top of the second page of O2, under the section complaint summary?
What's your comment? What is your question?
My question is, does he see that?
Where it says complaint summary?
Yes.
Responded to a complaint regarding tree and fill work with no approvals. As reported, there was fill brought into the site and trees were removed, sick and piled up. Photos were taken and a letter will be drafted ASAP.
Okay.
That's what it says.
Okay. And you heard Mr. Lair make clear for the record that the complaint was filed on March 17th, 2020, correct?
Yes.
Did you or your company or any representative of the company ever bring this information to the attention of DEP?
I don't believe so.
Have you or any representative of your company ever brought this information to the attention of the Morris County Soil Conservation District?
You know, I have to object to this, Mr. Chairman, because...
Okay.
This is a factual
Wait,
question.
can I hear his objection? Go ahead.
Yeah, it goes to number one, relevance, and number two, this isn't, you're mixing apples and oranges, because the DEP letter is based upon a plan prepared by an engineer. The engineer is out there. Why don't you ask her the question, not Mr. Rocker? She's the one who prepared the map that accompanied the letter of interpretation. She's the one who prepared the application, or the environmental person. It was issued to John Rocker, but it was not prepared. The application was not prepared by Mr. Rocker. If you actually read the first page, it says, based on information submitted and upon a site inspection conducted by the division staff on September 4, 2019, the division has determined that the wetlands and water boundary lines, based upon a plan, blah, 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 last revised November 19, 2019, is accurate as shown, okay? So there was an expert, William G. Hollows, and of Murphy and Hollows, prepared a plan. Mr. Rocker didn't prepare that, and it was submitted with the LOI. So I don't know what you're asking him the question about the LOI.
A complaint was filed in relation to his property, so it's not for the engineer to respond to that question. I only asked Mr. Rocker if the information in the complaint was brought to the attention of two other governmental authorities. And I believe the answer is no.
We're not going to answer that question. I'm sorry. It just has nothing, no relevance to the site plan application.
Wait, Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes,
may?
go ahead. I was going to ask your opinion.
Mr. Freeman, do you want to make a proffer as to the relevance of the question and the line of questioning for the board attorney to consider how to advise the board chair whether to permit the continuation of the questioning notwithstanding the objection made?
I'll do my best, counsel. It should be clear by now, the only reason why we have been appearing in an objector capacity is because there is concern, eyewitness accounts of the unapproved movement of dirt and the cutting of trees and removing them from the site. A complaint was filed.
Okay, let him finish.
I'm going to let him finish because,
Yeah, let him finish.
because I think it's a question.
I understand what you're
Yep,
saying,
yep,
but let him
yep.
finish.
A complaint was filed, and on what basis would this board want to consider this application when a violation of that nature was alleged? Now,
Go ahead.
there is a lot of uncertainty as to why there was no action taken on the response other than the filing of the one report. There were pictures taken as well. They're part of O2. And given the fact that the letter of interpretation, which constitutes a relevant component of this application, it was filed 2 months after the letter of interpretation was issued. This episode happened. So it is relevant to know factually, has the information in that complaint been reported? I was asked how long was I going to take.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, but there's an issue with what you're saying. One, you haven't stated when the violation occurred.
Well, Mr. Chairman.
The alleged, Mr. Chairman, I believe it's an alleged violation?
Yeah, the alleged.
Violation.
Well,
I didn't mean alleged.
Can I interject something?
Well,
hold on, let the board attorney.
I would suggest not at this point. We're hearing a proffer as to why the questioning is being asked to consider the objection.
Well,
so let Mr. Freeman finish.
The second page of O2 spells it out very clearly. And this is coming from the township's former official in the section that states complaint summary.
Yeah, no, you don't have to read it again. We all see it. The problem I'm having, and I think the problem our attorney's having, is that this removal of fill and trees, there's no date put on this. And I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, when we were doing the use variance, Mr. Rocker specifically denied any involvement in this and said that his, his ownership of the property, to his knowledge, did not take place at the time this took place, or, was not connected. Unless you have witnesses that say that he personally or someone on his behalf or someone in his employment did it, I don't see the relevancy.
And can I just point something out to Mr. Freeman? I mean,
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Freeman,
That's okay. Sorry.
Mr. Freeman, you have no objection to Mr. Rocker attempting to explain the situation with his counsel's being here present?
I'd love to hear what he has to say.
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
I mean, it's just a bit of information that might be relevant, because after the bizarre and continual appearances of Mr. Friedman with respect to his objections or his client's objections, the real basis of which I would love to know. I asked Kathy, my engineer, to meet me out at the site. We actually took an hour and a half and located the area of the disturbance that has been alluded to constantly throughout this process, and concluded, and Kathy's here tonight, that in fact, the area of trees and the disturbance that has been the subject of this continual you know,
Objection.
objection is in fact outside the limits of the wetlands on the property. It's not even impacting the area that is technically over the wetlands boundary. And Kathy's here and she can testify what we discovered. And in fact, the grading, the change of gradation to the property don't imply the import of any material. It implies, and I'm not trying to describe it better than she can describe it, but there's really no basis to conclude that material has been imported to this site. I have no idea what happened out there, but I can say that after visiting the site with my engineer, the impact that's being referred to is not in the wetlands. It's on the good side of the boundary.
Upland is the
Upland.
proper term.
And
It's in the upland area, yeah.
And more importantly,
And she's here.
Yes.
and if you want her to testify, board, she's here.
Or you can call her as a rebuttal witness.
Yeah.
As a rebuttal
right.
witness.
Yes.
But more importantly, I don't believe this board has jurisdiction over this issue, that if he wanted to challenge the determination of the DEP,
Right.
he had the right to go and seek and challenge the letter of interpretation, or seek an amendment, or write a letter to the DEP and say, are you aware that this occurred? And by the way, does it have any impact on your letter of interpretation? None of that was done. He comes 3 years later and says, oh, by the way, there was this complaint, and it invalidates your letter of interpretation.
I
Since when
understand.
is that my client's responsibility? You should have gone to the DEP.
Okay.
If you thought that there was a violation.
Excuse me.
You're
Calm
directing
down.
it to the Objectors Council
Calm down.
at this point. Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
my advice is that while there has been some questioning already, Mr. Freeman, first of all, do you have any further questioning of this particular witness with respect to these documents?
Those are all the questions I had. I just wanted to find out if the information was reported by this witness or his representatives. That's all.
That's fine.
And then if you have no further questions, I guess there's nothing further to rule on.
Well, I think there's an open question by the chairman. The observation was, I'm not here with any witnesses, and I've not been here with witnesses since the use variance application.
I didn't realize that,
commenced.
but that could have changed.
Let him
But-
finish, please.
But what I would like to offer in response to your question is, in the Oprah request form, our client who submitted it made specific reference to contacting Tom D'Elia in February. Obviously, that means February of 2020. February of 2020 was the month in between when the LOI was issued and when Mr. D'Elia went out and did his inspection and filed his report. So to offer a further proffer as to time and place, the information is right on the Oprah request form.
Now, I understand what you're saying, but that's basically hearsay. We have no knowledge of when, and to be honest with you, we have no knowledge of when any of these parties observed it, first observed it, didn't observe it, did observe it, who observed what. And I respect your objection as the attorney, but Mr. Goldman isn't here, neither is Tommy D'Elia, so we can't hear testimony from them as to when they proffer this incident even occurred, if you understand what I'm saying. The documents' dates don't mean anything as far as that's concerned. This could have happened 10 years ago and somebody just noticed it. Go ahead.
But, thank you, Mr. Chairman. But the documents have been submitted, the questions have been asked and answered, so, and the board will consider all the evidence and give it the appropriate weight.
Thank you.
Thank you, that's all I had.
Thank you. Let's take a 10-minute break, and then we will come back and hear some comments from the public, if there are any. 10-minute break.
Which way? Out.
Recording stopped.
I now declare that we're back from our break, and we're called back to order at, what is that?
9:35.
9:35.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, just wanted to confirm, Objectors Council has no further questions, correct?
That's correct.
And objectors, it's my understanding that there may be an intention to have rebuttal. So is the objector, just for confirmation purposes, the objector is not presenting any objector's case, correct?
No.
No, meaning yes, you're not presenting any objector's case, correct?
No case.
No case. All right, and I think we got.
Thank you.
We got it clear enough for now. Then at that point, it's my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Lair, that it's your intention to put on a rebuttal witness.
Just for 2 minutes, yes.
Yeah, and by rebuttal, I guess, really rebuttal to the extent of the questioning of Mr. Rocker by Objectors Council, am I correct? Okay. So
If you-
technically, it may not be rebuttal, but just a further witness.
Swear his witness, yeah.
She's
I'm
already
going
sworn
to,
in.
Well,
I'm going to
okay.
keep this short. Ms. Muller was already sworn.
Okay.
Yeah, and she's already been accepted as an expert
Yes.
civil engineer by this board. Your license remains in good standing, correct?
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Muller, you heard the objector's comments, did you not?
Yes, I did.
And you also heard Mr. Rocker talk about a site visit with you. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And when did that site visit occur?
That was early this year in between the hearings, because we heard this information. And Mr. Rocker and I met out on the site. We took a walk through it to see what could possibly be the subject that keeps coming up repetitively. So we did walk the whole site. Again, I've had.
And that was in response to Mr. Friedman's objection raised during the February 1 hearing, correct?
That's correct.
All right. So what was the result of your observations when you did the site visit?
So basically, we walked out there. I looked at some maps that we've had over the years, the LOI maps, the tree maps, and we walked the site. The site is deceivingly.
Use the microphone.
Yep.
Is it on, Deborah? I don't
Yes.
see it. Okay,
Mhm. Yes.
thank you.
The property is 520 feet deep. So even I was a little bit surprised getting out there and going all the way in the back where these wetlands are to see where, some disturbance, alleged disturbance may have happened. There was an old material pile about halfway, maybe a little bit more than halfway back on the property historically. And that's the area that had been disturbed. Some trees were taken down. They were weed trees. We had the maps with us where the wetlands were, and all the trees that were taken out were really kind of behind lot 8.01. If you look on the cover sheet these are our site plans that were submitted. Behind 8.01 in the corner of this notch out by the pavement.
Could you just highlight where the wetland line is for the board and for the public?
Sure, the wetlands are back here.
Okay, so is it your conclusion that, based upon your observations on site, that the debris or trees removed were not taken out of the wetland areas?
Per my historic surveys, they were not taken out of the wetland areas, and they were not taken out of the buffer area either. So they were greater than 50 feet from those wetlands.
I have nothing further.
Okay, but before we proceed, Mr. Chairman, if I may, since we marked up an exhibit.
Yes, I was just.
Technically, we have a new exhibit, so, what?
810.
810, and,
Yeah, good, mark it. You got it.
810 is the, cover sheet,
To the site plan, correct.
to site plan, last revised,
No revision. Dated August 3rd, 2021.
8/3/2021 with,
With the
highlighted,
Yellow line for the.
yellow for the wetland,
Delineation.
location.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Does the objector attorney have any questions for the engineer?
Cross-examination?
Cross-examination. Yeah, don't lie to us, real quick. Go ahead. Only teasing.
Do you happen to have a copy of O2 in front of you?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Lehrer invited me to ask this question. The information that's in O2, did you bring it to the attention of DEP?
No.
Okay. Did you bring that information to the attention of the Soil Conservation District?
There would be no reason to.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions
I
of
have
the?
nothing further.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the public of either the objector's attorney or of the engineer with her rebuttal? Okay, hearing none, I close it to the public. How about the Zoom person? I'm sorry.
Nobody's raising their hand on Zoom. Nope.
Okay, thank you. Then now I close it. I keep forgetting the Zoom person. You gotta put a big sign up there, Zoom, so I remember.
Well, if there's somebody raising their hand, I'll let you know.
Okay, good.
I just have a quick closing statement, and I will be done.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's important to take just a moment and summarize how we came to this point. As you know, my client's initial application a few years ago was denied by this board. It was a purely residential application for 36 units on 3 floors. Many of this board's concerns with that first application were addressed in the second use variance application. To name a few, the first application was an all residential building. The density was much higher than the second application and had no retail component. There was no connectivity to Valley Road. The building was closer to the southerly neighbors. There was no safe school stop. In the second use variance application, we came back with a mixed-use concept, reduced the density, and made a compelling argument that many of the permitted uses in the zone, such as a small hotel, banquet facility, an outdoor dining, restaurant or bar, a movie theater, or a health club would be more intensive uses than what we proposed. While reducing the residential unit count to 24, my client still set aside 3 units as affordable housing. We also addressed the issues left unaddressed during the first application. The second application also addressed the important master plan concept of providing walkability to the downtown by including a sidewalk to the PNC Bank, and as Mr. Kyle so artfully articulated, let's keep in mind that this building will be a main focal point. In its current state, it is unsightly. At best, we will remove that building with something we believe the town should be proud of for many years to come. We'll be before this board now for site plan approval, as you're aware. And Mr. Kyle, I will not repeat his testimony. He did a fine job of rounding things up and bringing things together. Between the use variance and this site plan application, we've been before this board for nearly 2 years. We believe that with the recommendations of the board, which have been incorporated into this plan, this mixed-use building will be a wonderful addition to this township. We hope you agree. We hope you support the site plan approval, design waivers, and the variance relief. And I close my case, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Now, opening up the comments of the public, are there any public members that wish to make a comment concerning this application to the board? Okay. Any Zoom members of the public? Okay. I'm closing it to members of the public comments. Now, I think I want to, before our deliberations, I'd like to poll the board as to which design they would like if, in fact, we do choose to approve this. That way we know what we're discussing. We have the original, which the board members at the time weren't that enamored with. We have A8 and A9. Jerry, could you start us and let us give your opinion as to which one of these renditions you would prefer if, in fact, this is approved?
Right, correct. So if in fact is the key words here, I think. If it is approved, then unquestionably the first rendition, yes. Okay. I think it stands the test of time. I think it's, it's a stately building, and I think let me just say it this way. If we go with a building this size, it's changing, I think, the look and feel of our downtown. So we're going in that direction. I think this is the past. The angled buildings and the wood and everything else. I think if you're going to build in a more urbanized downtown, then it should be that building, which will look great for a long time.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
Let me ask you a question. If the rest of the board feels differently, would that change your opinion as to the application as a whole?
Don't know.
Okay.
But right now, if it's built, that's where I.
That's what you like,
if-
okay. Got it, Tom.
Well, Mr. Aronio and I do not agree. I thought the first building kind of looked like a bank building, which does have a downtown feel to it, but considering the neighbors to the south, that is south, and the rest of the field, the Goddard School, it has less of a urban, more of a rural feel, while I don't know what it's going to be like in 2062. I'll be looking up at the grass. I would prefer of these two, A9, because it has a more homelier, homely's not
Residential
good.
feel.
Yeah, residential feel, thank you.
It's not homely, is it?
No, it's not homely, and it doesn't look necessarily like a business, although there needs to be a business for this application to proceed.
Gary?
Well, I appreciate the time that you guys have spent on the whole matter and the redesigns that you've gone through. If we're gonna be picking one, I'm leaning towards A9. With respect to the bank-looking building, it is a very stately-looking building. It's not necessarily in our downtown. We don't really have a downtown. We're going to have multiple buildings going 20 years into the future that are going to look like this. So I don't think we're going to be developing it so grand that we're going to need buildings that are going to be so stately. Right.
Okay. Ben?
A9 for me as well, for the residential look.
All right, so I guess by the polling of the board, A9.
You did not apply.
I'm just saying, by the polling of the rest of the board, A9 wins. I also prefer A9, only because I think that I can't judge what's going to be in the future 30 or 40 years from now. But now I think this more matches the across the street Goddard School. It matches a house next to it. It matches more of a residential look to it, which this is residential, but it's also commercial. But it kind of downplays the commercial end of it in the sense that it looks more of a building that is warm and friendly and matches the environment that it's in. And it isn't really a downtown there. It's more of a streetscape than anything else. I'd rather be looking at this from Plainfield Avenue than the original design. So in that matter, I guess A9 wins as far as the polling of the board. Now, getting to our,
Relief sought?
No, yeah, the relief sought, our deliberations on that, taking into mind that the poll of the board just approved the A9, or favored the A9. Gary, let me start with you as far as
Mr. Chairman, I apologize for interrupting. Would it help maybe if we just confirmed exactly the relief sought before we
Okay,
proceeded
go
with
ahead. I'm sorry.
the
Yes.
deliberations? And I just want to make sure that the council for both parties have an opportunity to weigh in if and when I'm incorrect. But my understanding is the board, the application before the board now, after the use variance and other relief was granted in phase 1 of this bifurcated proceeding pursuant to section 76B of the MLUL, is for preliminary and final site plan approval. If it's an approval and if Exhibit A9 continues to win the polling, if you will, the relief sought includes one bulk variance, C variance for height of 38.5 feet versus 35 feet maximum permitted. That is a C variance at that maximum limit. Also, the relief sought would include 2 design waivers, one pursuant to section 153.1G, 5% of the interior portion of the parking areas containing at least 10 stalls, excluding all perimeter landscaping and required buffer areas shall be landscaped, whereas the proposal is for approximately 2% to be landscaped as opposed to 5%. and Section 154.1E3, requiring retaining walls not exceeding 4 feet in height in the front yard, or more importantly, not exceeding 6 feet in height in the side or rear yards, whereas proposed the refuse enclosure with a 6-foot board-on-board fence on top of a 4-foot high wall in the side yard would constitute a 10-foot retaining wall / fence, as opposed to 6-foot maximum permitted in the side yard. Believe that is all the relief sought. Would you concur,
We've captured
counsel?
it properly, Mr.
Objectors, counsel, notwithstanding that you're objecting, did I accurately state the relief sought in your opinion?
That's what I think it is.
Thank you.
Just for the record, in case the recording didn't get his statement that he did agree with our attorney.
Correct, objector's attorney from afar.
Yes, I
Yes?
agree with what was said.
Thank you. So that is the relief sought. There would be a multitude of conditions if
Yeah. I think one of them was a
variances-
bathroom on the public.
Yeah, well, I very quickly will go through the including but not limited to conditions, and applicant's counsel can correct me where I may be wrong, but all conditions of all prior approvals to the extent not inconsistent with the relief that may be granted herein. The comments and items listed in the planner's memo, Liz Laney of January 23, the engineer's memo, Samantha Nello, December 28, 2021, I believe. The all UHAC requirements for affordable housing units, including bedroom distribution and the like. Stormwater management, O&M manual, operations and maintenance manual being recorded. Fire marshal review and approval at the building permit stage. There was what I would refer to as a contingent conditional extension approval with respect to sewer capacity, given the current, I don't want to use any terms, but the current situation with respect to sewer capacity. Maybe Mr. Lair can weigh in on the exact wording as proposed as stipulated to by the applicant, I should say.
The language from Mott McDonald was, if no sewer capacity is available, the applicant should clarify whether they intend to secure a permit to locate and construct an individual sewage system from the Long Hill Township Board of Health. The answer is yes, but because capacity is not yet available, we're asking for a contingent conditional extension in case, the approval, in case once that capacity becomes available, we just don't want our approval to lapse. That's really the issue.
So if the capacity comes available in that interim period, you wish to avail yourself of same as opposed to the alternative, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The Morris County Soil Conservation District and any other outside agency approvals required. Building to be sprinklered. I believe there was an emergency generator that may be located on the property, and if so, I believe there was an area which was designated for same if and when it is located on the property. Fencing subject to the review and approval of our planner with respect to color and materials. I believe it's a solid fence. Walkway, bear with me. The walkway that was discussed, which may need to be elevated or otherwise addressed with respect to 1/3 portion that's subject to DEP regulation as wetlands and/or wetland buffer. The extension of the sidewalk south to the end of the property and a 5-foot easement on the other side of the fence, if you will, or the width of the easement being 5 feet, which that easement would be provided to the township should the township wish to accept it, and it would be maintained by the applicant if and when it is installed. No?
Maintenance issue was one to be resolved with the township.
I'm sorry, maintenance to be resolved with the township, correct, if the township wishes to accept it. Bear with me. construction of the sidewalk north to the bank, and performance bonds and maintenance bonds with respect to same. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Compliance as is required nevertheless with the new state, it's not even new anymore, the state statute with respect to electric vehicle charging stations and make-ready spaces, carbon monoxide detection and exhaust for the tandem parking spaces in the garage, bathroom stipulated to on the first floor.
We never
public area,
decided that, but
which may.
okay. It's okay. It's okay.
It's now stipulated to by the applicant, and whether they take it from the storage area, if I recall correctly, or elsewhere, that's, I believe, up to them.
But the plans have to be revised to show.
And all plans will be revised accordingly for submission as a condition of approval. I'm open to any conditions of approval which I may have missed or misstated.
I think you got everything.
No? So those would be the conditions.
Are there any, to your recollection, is that good?
No, he did a good job.
Okay. And he read his own scribble.
There you go. I'm the only one who can apparently. So those would be the conditions in the event the board grants the approval. And again, just to reiterate, while this is a bifurcated proceeding, and originally with respect to the D variance that was required, that required 5 affirmative votes for passage. At this second phase, the site plan and associated bulk variance and design waiver phase, a simple majority, 3 out of 5 is required for passage, notwithstanding the fact that the applicant had to reprove the negative criteria on the D1 use variance, as you heard the planner address.
Thank you.
So 3 out of 5.
Thank you.
Could you please explain the bifurcated approval that is being sought and how that weighs in on our deliberations tonight? It was, the site plan was approved.
No.
No, the use.
The use, I'm sorry. This is the site plan.
Right.
The use was approved. And it's not gonna be disproved if the deliberation goes negative tonight. It's still allowed to be built, this type of building is allowed to be built there.
Well, again, and again, all council are welcome to weigh in if and when they believe I'm incorrect. But the D1 use variance relief was approved by this board, as well as a bulk variance for 3 stories versus 2 stories permitted. That was previously approved, and that already runs with the land, if you will. However, the bifurcated proceeding is specifically for the site plan approval, preliminary and final, as well as those 2 design waivers and the 1 bulk variance with respect to the height, assuming A9 architecture is chosen. That's the new relief that's sought. If you're asking me what happens if it's not granted, the applicant has a use variance and a bulk variance for 3 stories versus 2, but no site plan approval and no additional relief.
Right.
That's what happens.
But this size property was approved for this lot.
A use variance for the construction of a building containing 24 residential apartments.
The bulk standards were not approved, is that right?
Sorry. With the retail was approved, and the 3 stories versus 2 was approved. Nothing else was approved. So they'll need a site plan approval, I think, as a practical reality in order to construct at least this proposal.
Right.
A building this size was approved.
It was.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
A building.
Was the building that size, or was it building the height?
Yeah, this
like
height
the square footage wasn't approved or anything like that, the floor plan or nothing like that.
No, a use was approved.
The use was approved.
A use
but
was
not
approved,
the
and a
dimensions of building.
3-story building. And a 3-story building.
They did need a variance
Was-
for floor area ratio or anything because.
Was that in there? Was that approved?
No, they didn't, and partly it's because residential isn't permitted here. So
Right.
all of those standards
That's
don't
all rolled
apply.
into this part of the application.
Right,
Yes,
so,
that's my
none of those standards apply, and so, but the fact that they can do residential was approved.
Right.
Yeah.
I know it puts you in an odd, not an odd situation necessarily, but it would be up to the applicant to address what was approved and what wasn't if there's a denial. But again, if at least three of the board members this evening grant the second phase, for lack of a better term, to sum it up, then there is no issue. This is what is approved.
Did that clarify your question?
Yes and no. I mean, I'm still a little confused whether a building this size was approved in the previous.
A building of 3 stories was approved. So essentially this size.
And units.
Yeah, and unit, and 24 units. So it's essentially this size.
So.
Yes.
So in a sense.
Yes.
What it meant.
Yes. We're just going by the design now, the parking, the general look of the property. That's what we're.
All the site plan issues are now before you, along with the 2 deviations and the height variance for the gables.
Right.
And the legal standard for the site plan? That's the negative criteria?
Well, no, the legal standard for the variance was the positive and negative criteria, which was accurately stated by applicant's planner as being the criteria. The deviation standards for the 2 design waivers was accurately stated under section 51A of the municipal land use law, which is essentially what I call undue hardship light, practical difficulties with the strict regulation of the strict enforcement of the regulation or application of the regulation, in other words, give us relief therefrom.
Can I just mention one thing?
Sure.
To answer your question directly,
Hold that microphone closer to you.
The prior application with the plans that were done by the prior architect, you permit a .50 floor area ratio in the zone. The plans were at .49. In this application, it's smaller. It's .455.
But can I make a distinction here? My understanding is that we didn't approve that
No,
plan.
no.
We approved a use, although that was a plan that was
Well, the question
presented
was-
as part of your application at the time, right?
I think the question was,
Is that right
was
or
the
no?
building that we saw before the
Oh, I'm
same
sorry.
size during the use, and it's a little bit smaller?
I'm sorry, I thought what you said was
I
you
talking about
approved a plan.
The whole prior application of the use of the property.
Right.
And there was no building then, it was
No,
just
no,
use.
but the plan we presented that time
Was bigger.
Oh, at
was a
that
little
time.
bit bigger.
Okay, and that was approved.
That was approved.
But the plan wasn't approved.
The site
The
plan.
site plan, the site, the use.
24 units.
Right, 24
I
units.
think the more people speak, the more confused they
Yes.
make things. Respectfully, the use was
Sorry.
approved,
That's me.
and the 3 stories versus 2 stories was approved.
Right, okay.
The standards for the variance, the C variance for the height was accurately stated. As far as the standard, you'll decide whether it was proven or not. The 2 design waivers were the standard under 51A of the municipal land use law. It was accurately stated. You'll decide if it was proven or not. And for the site plan approval, those are generally granted so long, the only issues really are if there's a concern with respect to the site circulation or ingress and egress. Otherwise, for example, if it were a fully conforming site plan, there would be no real basis to deny it, other than if there were safety concerns with respect to ingress, egress, or site circulation. So I'm
Okay.
trying to accurately answer your questions.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Tom, would you like to start the deliberation?
wouldn't.
Well, you're going to anyway.
Way to put it on the spot.
Oh. I'll start with, I think on the record, I was opposed to this to start with. Although I may have voted yes for it to be bifurcated and come to here. It's a difficult one. We did agree to 3 stories. Now we're agreeing to 3 stories plus 3.5 feet. Nah, no big deal, to me, if we're going with the A9, which I think that's what we voted to
That's
put
what
forward.
the consensus was.
The consensus was, no vote. We did allow the 24 units. We did allow the 3 stories. We have worked with you over 3, is this a 3rd or 4th meeting? I think it's a 3rd meeting. Over
4.
the particulars, is it 4? Over the particulars of this building. And The use was approved. The building is as best as we all can make it. And while my initial thoughts were no, my thoughts are the positives and the negatives are within line, and I will be voting in favor of this.
Thank you. Gary?
I think that this is a really big building, larger than any of the other things that have been before us. We recently approved something in downtown Sterling.
Could you pull the microphone down a little bit?
That was kind of, pretty large for downtown Sterling. This is not downtown Sterling. This is a property that, for lack of a better word, is unsightly. And I think that this improves that site. The side that's facing Plainfield Avenue is not quite as much as wide as this building is, as long as it is. So I don't think it's going to present itself that much to people passing by, because I think most of it stretches into the land. It was approved by the board previously for this number of units. And the A9 criteria, or the A9, not the criteria, the fact that it's a little bit higher, but now has these gabled roofs, I think is addressing some of the original concerns that the board had of the look of the prior presentation. So I'm inclined to be in favor of this for the reasons that I stated.
Thank you. Ben?
Yeah, so the approval's already been given for the units and the use. Looking through the design waivers, I think that there's the fence height is reasonable for what it is. It's, better to have more screening. I think the percentage of the landscaping is also, benefits from having it in the periphery as opposed to throughout the, project. The A9 is what is the project that I thought was, best for, aesthetically for the neighborhood, and I thought that it met the C variance requirements for the general welfare and design. And there's no major negative due to that, a little bit of height being added. And I think the benefits outweigh the detriment for, by choosing that, that style. And, I guess my general comment on the site plan would be that it's, it's designed in a way that's, best to serve that, that amount of people living there, and then the residential, as was displayed a few months ago. So I'm inclined to vote for it as well.
Thank you. Jerry?
Well, I guess reading the tea leaves, it doesn't really matter too much what
Your
my
opinion always
opinion is,
matters, Jerry.
but thank you, Ed. Well, I want to thank Mr. Rocker and the team. You guys did a great job, I think, of trying to meet the concerns, every concern of this board, every step of the way. And I want to thank you for that. But I have trouble reconciling this, like I said the first time, with the overall goals of our master plan. And if you read the master plan, Long Hill Township, it starts out by saying Long Hill Township is a rural and low-density residential community characterized by large tracts of open space, attractive single-family residential neighborhoods, tree-lined streets, and a general absence of large non-residential land uses. Now, that may be changing. We may not be so rural anymore. We may be changing to suburban. We may already be there, but, generally, we don't have, high-density housing, we'll call it, right? And one of the objectives of the master plan is to conserve and enhance the essential rural and residential character of Long Hill Township in order to best provide for the health, safety, and general welfare of our residents, and to maintain the township's identity as a fundamentally low-density residential community and ensure that future development is compatible with and sensitive to existing residential areas and established neighborhoods. I'm just going to pull out a few things from the first few pages, and that's it. Sorry, so bear with me. One other thing in land use and housing starts out with to prohibit additional multifamily housing, residential development in the township unless so required by the New Jersey Council on Affordable Housing. A couple more statements. To maintain the rural character and relatively low-density residential development pattern of the township, additional development of multifamily residential properties beyond that shown on the land use plan is prohibited. So I have trouble reconciling these terms. So again, for those reasons, among others, some of them, like the negative criteria, I can't say that it does, because I think it not only, it tramples on our zoning plan. I think that's what it does. It's an abomination of our zoning plan. So I can't say that there's no impairment to it, because there is. There's other situations that I don't like. There's weird parking. I mean, stacked parking is not something I expect to have in Long Hill Township. That's something, I've lived in Hoboken, I've lived in New York City, I've lived in places where parking is an issue. I don't like to create parking issues for residents. I think it's a problem, and I can't say yes to that. We have residential complaints. We have an objector. My apologies to you, but I don't know your issue. I know there's environmental issues or water issues, but there's an objection to that. But there's, more importantly, there's residents that live in that area that don't want multifamily, housing in there where they live. I wouldn't want that in my backyard. So we're making an exception to our zoning ordinance and it's negatively impacting an existing resident. And I think the criteria is that there should be no negative impact to the existing residents. So I can't reconcile that. So for those reasons, I cannot be in favor of the application, but I wish you luck, and I hope it looks beautiful, and I hope everybody's happy in the end. One more thing. We studied this area extensively when we rezoned it as a township recently. And during that study, we could not find a way to put mixed use in that area. So it stayed commercial. And there was a reason for that. And when we were doing planning, we said, and I was on the planning board at the time, what we said was, we're gonna have commercial uses and we're gonna have residential uses, and we're gonna keep those separate, because throughout the town, we have conflicts where there's residential uses and where there's bars / nightclub, that kind of activity, taverns. That happens at night. Residents don't like it. We receive a lot of complaints. We receive noise complaints, bottles, dumpsters, people leaving, urinating, all that stuff happens. So residents don't like it where they live. So we said, whenever we build this stuff in the future, we're gonna keep them separate. We're gonna have large green spaces in between. So there would be the commercial district, which would be that whole area in there what we're talking about. And no offense to the existing residents, but that would be eventually phased out. And that's why a lot of it looks like it's in disrepair, because it's going through a transitionary phase from residential to commercial, which takes a long time. And the property values may go down, but then they come back as something else. So that's what was happening here. And this, to me, is an abomination of that whole plan, where we have a commercial district buffered with large spaces of green in between the residents and the commercial area. So again, I can't be more emphatic about being against something like this. So that's my position. Thank you for listening to me for so long. I'm sorry to talk so much.
It's okay, Jerry. We appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Well, I, on the other hand, think that I don't think pure commercial would be, even though it was rezoned for that, I think that was a different time. We're living in times that pure commercial really doesn't go anymore. I mean, it's almost, office space is empty now. Nobody wants it. We're not putting bars here. We're putting a light commercial use here. I think this is a good transition between the residents that are there and the commercial that is the PNC Bank, and that's to the other side. I think a lot of the master plan, which is being looked at right now, may change a lot of the wording in there, because I don't think it applies as much as it used to. Trying to keep residential and commercial separate, I think, is a little bit unrealistic in this time and age. I think A9 is a nice mix of the two. I don't think that the surrounding areas are going to be negatively impacted, because there will be really no nighttime use of the commercial property, and the residential should be a low impact on the area. I don't have any problem with tandem parking. It's one unit gets 2 spots tandem. They can figure it out. People park like that in some garages in their houses. I don't think it's as big a deal. I respect Jerry's opinions, and I think the town is I think, modifying and changing a lot more than we were in the past. I think this is something that will be beneficial for the area. I think it does meet the negative and positive criteria. The applicant, I have to thank him for putting so much work and effort into changing the look of the building, into modifying, being agreeable to our changes that we suggested, working with the site and making the best use of it in a manner that helps us provide housing, a residential apartment housing. I think this is a better use than a lot of the other apartment complexes we see in town. It's a lot nicer. I think it'll have a less impact on the area, and therefore I'm in favor of it. Do I hear a motion from one of the individuals that expressed a positive viewpoint?
And I take it, it'll be a motion to grant all the relief sought by the applicant with all the stipulated two conditions.
Right.
Yeah, what the attorney said.
You want to move that?
I move that.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call.
Mr. Grosskopf,
Yes.
Mr. Giannakis,
Yes.
Mr. Aronio,
No.
Mr. Lindeman,
Yes.
Chairman Correct,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your patience.
Good job, thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. Take care. All right, what's coming up next?
Next, on June
5th?
On June 7th, you have 3 residential applications coming.
3? That's ambitious.
Oh, I have all the faith in all of them.
What might they be that we're hitting 3?
Oh, just bulk, existing non-conformities,
What were they
things like
building,
that.
decks, pools, what?
I think, we'll see. I don't have my thing in front of me. Hold on.
Yeah.
Let me see. Hold on just a sec. Give me a sec.
Just want to know what we're in for.
Hey, we did those 2 residential
I know, really quickly, yeah.
in like an hour.
But that wall was, that was like a half a one. Even though the wall was big.
I can't see it in front. Sorry, I don't have my form in front of me, but I have all the confidence in you.
No, I'm not saying we can't. I just don't want to shortchange the third person.
You won't. It's all good.
Okay. And I would encourage everyone to make it if they can. I mean, I don't like having a short board. I prefer to have all 9 people here, just so that we can have people's input.
Can I wish my wife a happy anniversary from the Daz?
No.
Because it is our anniversary.
Well, you know something, you gotta make sacrifices. She'll understand.
Wait.
I'll write her a note.
She already gave me permission, it's okay.
Okay,
She wanna come
good.
down here and hang out?
Yeah, she can play in the back room. All right, any other business we need to take care of?
Not from my standpoint.
Okay, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll move that.
Okay, second. All right, everybody in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned.